Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of the Elevate Your Running podcast. I'm so excited to be here this week because I have a guest this week. So it's not just me that you're listening to, which feels so special. And now I also get to sip some water while we record, which is awesome. I have Stevie Lynn Smith, and she is a sports dietitian. And she's here to debunk our nutrition myths. And I think this is going to be such a great episode. If you can hear my dog, Kenzie, she also agrees that it's going to be a great episode. And it's going to be, I think, really eye opening in a lot of ways because Stevie and I were talking about this before we started recording that as I got into my first marathon cycle, I was waking up hungry. I was waking up during the middle of the night hungry. I was hungry throughout the day. And I finally asked my coach at maybe right around taper time, like, is this normal? And she's like, no, please eat more. So, we're going to debunk a lot of myths that are out there, maybe some things that you've heard on social media or read, and it's going to be a really fun conversation. Hello, Stevie, and welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here. I'm also very surprised that my dog, Chance, did not join in when he heard the barking. He's pretty tired from managing me all day so far. So,
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I feel like that was perfect timing. Just
great
to give
timing.
people context on what's happening, I have painters outside of my home all week, and Kenzie is not loving it at all. And they literally just walked up as I hit record. So that's fun.
Of course, that's always how it works. But yeah, no,
I
I'm
know.
so excited. Obviously my career is around sports nutrition, so I love talking about it. So I'm so excited to have this.
Yeah, absolutely. Would you give more of your background of like who you are, what you do, who you help, that sort of thing?
Yeah, absolutely. So, of course, I'm a registered dietitian, board certified in sports nutrition. I have been practicing for 12 years now, which I'm one of those people who always thinks they're perpetually 28. And sometimes I'm like,
Same,
I'm
same.
like, oh wait, you're going to be 36 in a couple months. You are not 28 anymore, which is fine. Aging is a gift. I'm not shaming that in any way, shape, or form. But yes, I've been practicing for 12 years. I started in clinical nutrition, which in the dietitian space, like you'll hear two views. I loved it. I think it helped me kind of shape my skill set, like working with all different types of people, all types of different complex medical situations, we'll say diagnoses, and then just like counseling and educating. I got a lot of experience there. Eventually, it was never the plan, but in my senior year of dietitian school, as I call it, during my little clinical rotations, I actually trained for my first full Ironman at the same
Right.
time back in 2012. So as I continued on in endurance sports and my nutrition career, eventually it just kind of like merged into sports nutrition. I never got into the field with the intention of being a sports dietitian. It just kind of happened that way. And I think it was perfect because I got such a great skill set. I started in endurance sports in 2009. I ran my first marathon at 19, back when things were
So
very
cool.
different. So it's also been a fun journey as an athlete and also as a professional to see how sports nutrition and also just endurance sports have changed so much over the years since I started, particularly in the fashion. Um, but yeah, so that's kind of a little bit of my career journey. I also never planned to start my own business, but here we are. I have my own private practice. It's my fourth year, going on fifth soon in business. Stevie Lynn Nutrition. I kept it really simple with the name. And I work with endurance athletes, mostly runners, triathletes. I love to work with, I don't know, the everyday athlete who
Yeah.
might be training for their first race or to
Mm.
take Kona qualify, BQ. Um, because I also think it's so important to look at the whole athlete and know that when we're looking to support your body, it's yeah, for all these awesome performance related goals, but also your health and for longevity in sport, and also just like living a very healthy, full life with your family and your friends and your community and all of the other things that are important to you. Um, so that's like my work
Yes.
side of
Oh
things.
my gosh.
I'm also dog mom. When I volunteer at my local shelter, dogs are very important to me too.
So much. I mean, we love dogs here on this podcast for sure. I mean, Kenzie's chiming in usually every episode. I love that so much. And I think what you do is so great in so many ways. And I know that I've worked with a sports dietitian before, and this was after running my first marathon and feeling like total garbage during the pandemic and trying to run fasted and trying to do all these things that worked for so long that
Mhm.
just stopped working. And
Yep.
I needed to dial things in. And what I love so much about what you do is that you can help the everyday athlete, you can help that first time marathoner. But I actually went back to that sports dietitian when I said, hey, my training is now totally different. I'm running so many more miles every week. My intensity is higher.
Mhm.
What does that look like? And what do I need to do to maximize that?
Mhm.
And food is fuel. It's definitely going to make us all stronger and happier if we really lean into it in a positive way. So I'm excited for today and everything that is to come. But before we get into our questions, I'd love to have an elevated moment. Do you have an elevated moment to share?
Where do I don't, oh man.
Life?
So many things, life. Um, you know, I feel like this might be kind of high level, maybe. But like I said, I got into endurance sports when I was very young, before it was very popular. Um, I did my first Ironman in 2012, and then from 2012 to 2019, I completed 10 Ironmans in that time frame. Which in hindsight, questionable choices. Um, but I bring this up because my career kind of stopped when I was diagnosed with an autoimmune disease, rheumatoid
Oh,
arthritis. Um,
yeah.
and I think, well, at the time, it was probably like I was like devastated and felt very much not in my body and kind of lost some of my identity as an athlete. I will say I'm very proud of how far I've come from diagnosis to really leaning into what my body needs, supporting my body, but also finding joy in sport in a different way, trying different things like long distance swimming, open water swimming, focusing more on strength training. So it took me a while, but I saw this change for me as an athlete as an opportunity to do things differently and rather than fight my body and resist it. I found other ways to still do what I love, connect with my community, and still challenge myself without doing like extra harm.
That's so great. I love that. What a big win for you. And you just completed like a 15K race?
Yes, I did.
Yeah.
My
That's so
favorite
great.
15K, very hilly. I very unfortunately live in a very flat area. Like I could go run 9 miles from my door and get under 100 feet of elevation.
That is
Um,
my dream.
I'm a flatlander, and I lived in DC for a while, and DC is much hillier than people would expect it to be. So I do miss the ability to have hills close by because as a coach, you know what a great training tool they can be. So that was my focus for this 15K is do a long run on hills every other weekend.
Oh, that's so great.
Mhm.
That's awesome. I love that goal. And like, that's such a cool way to kind of make it still fun and show up strong. And hills are great for a lot of strength, for a lot of
Mhm.
power. You can get speed from hills.
Mhm.
And yet I am still like I love flat. I just love running flat. So 100 feet or less in a run is like my dream.
Give me hills over a track workout any day. Any day.
That's so funny. That actually leads me to my elevated moment of really like shifting my mindset over the last few months and having I'm in kind of in this in between season. So I'm
Mhm.
training for a fall marathon. I'm about 15 and a half weeks out, 15 weeks out. And I'm in like more of this like speed season. So really fast workouts on the track. And for me, that's maybe tougher than a hilly run. It's like I, am a marathoner and I love like tempos, and that's my favorite place to train. And working the O2 max on the track is very difficult. And I've had this like mind shift of like what I can do and like just being curious going into the workouts and just seeing what happens. And I kind of have had this like breakthrough. And it was probably more in the mindset this whole time than like the physical body of like, can I do this? So that's been really exciting. And it's been really fun to like run with some girls that I haven't been able to run with before and feel strong and feel confident, and how that kind of demonstrates and shows up in other ways in life, I think is really cool too.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
You can take all the track, you can take the tempo, you can take the VO2 max. Give me my aerobic zone forever. So, which is why I loved Ironman. I was like, oh yeah, like let's go. The more
This is
miles I
great.
have, the better I do because I just pick everybody off towards the end of the race. But
You are the endurance queen.
I loved it.
Sounds like.
And
Yeah.
it's like I feel like everybody talks about mindset, right? Because it's so
Yeah,
important. But
it
until
is.
you start to experience, like really, like lean in and allow yourself that potential to have some of these unlocks with your mindset, because that's a lot of what I do with food and fueling with my one-on-one clients is yeah, like what we're eating, how we're timing it out, like how much we're eating is important. But to me, I want to know the why. Like, what is the why? How can we kind of push past just like the basics of sports nutrition? Again, all very important, but that mindset, see, like you had that huge unlock because
Yeah.
you really just got curious to see what you can do. We love
Yeah. Yeah, and like what's the worst thing that's going to happen out there? You slow down?
it, right?
You slow down. Great. That's
Great.
fine.
I know. I'm gonna channel that for the girl who does not like speed workouts. I'm gonna
Yeah.
manifest that.
Yeah, I challenge you. I challenge in like the most positive way ever. Anyone listening who maybe has that fear of going to the track of like it's more like you're collecting data on yourself and like what you can do and be curious, and it's okay to start a little bit slower or go in confident and see what you can do. And the worst thing that can happen is that you slow down.
hmm I love
Yeah. Well, let's get into this week's episode. So, we have nutrition myths debunked, and we're going to start out with a question or a myth, I should say, that I actually brought up at the very beginning of this episode. So, the myth is that it's okay to run my training runs fasted. Stevie, go.
well,
Stevie?
first of all, you know how I feel about this. I do not
No.
condone using endurance sports and training for a race as a way to lose weight. Nobody at me. I feel very strongly about this after
Yeah.
my years in endurance sports and things that I've seen with my one-on-one clients. There is a time and a place where this can be a very, I don't know, it's a good time to make it that goal, but it's not when you're training for a race. And also when it comes to looking at change in body weight and body composition, the why is very important. But as I tell clients that I work with, we're always going to come from the place of supporting your body first and making sure
Mhm.
it's nourished and fed and rested, and we're managing stress, because those things and that whole picture is more important to managing a healthy body weight and a healthy body composition than restricting a whole food group. Um, Restricting carbohydrates also has a lot of negative health implications that will
Mm.
show up in your performance. Maybe not right away, but down the line, the body keeps score. You might hear some of us sports dietitians say that. And, I have a lot of one-on-one clients that are like, okay, but this person is doing X, Y, and Z, and they're restricting their carbs and they're still training really well. And that's just all of our bodies are different. It might take a lot longer for the wheels to fall off for somebody else versus you. So again, we always focus on how is this going to help support your health and performance, and restricting carbs is not it.
Yeah, especially in the endurance space. Is there like a recommended amount of carbohydrates that endurance athletes should be consuming on a day-to-day basis? Or is that like it depends because it's so personalized to each person?
Yeah, so I mean, we have recommendations like based on training levels. Most endurance athletes, you should be at least like in training in that 5 to 7 grams per kilogram of body weight is like the recommendation. Sometimes there'll be some play in that depending on the training load, the intensity, the volume, right? Because when we think about a carb load, those numbers are up to 10 to 12 grams per kilogram of body weight. So, and again, I like those recommendations because sometimes it's a good way to put it into context for people. Because what I find is that most athletes don't actually realize how much more they need than the average person, because the average person is
Yeah.
usually eating too little anyways when it comes to
Yeah.
carbohydrate. So there'll be some play in those numbers, but that's like what the research says. That's kind of like our guideline there, and we can shift and adjust to give it context. I love using the performance plates as like a very quick visual way for people, so then we're
Yes.
not like obsessing over how many grams of carbs we're having every day. I think that gets a little scary over there, so I
Mhm.
usually direct that people to the performance place, because then you can also apply it like, oh, I'm at this family dinner and like, okay, maybe these aren't the food choices I would really want to make for myself, but I know I need to show up and eat to support my body. So like, I'm gonna make my performance plate the best I can with what I have available. And then there's less stress around like, oh, I can't measure this, I don't know what ingredients are in this, I need to weigh this. Because again, when we think about any of our health and performance goals, a big piece is stress management. So if we can kind of offload some of those more unnecessary stressors, the
Yes.
more the merrier that we can unload, right?
Absolutely. No, I'm a big believer in the performance plates, the performance bowls. Can you share what that is to someone who may not know?
Okay, wait, you froze for me, so I missed the first half of
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
that.
Yeah, I'm such a big believer in the performance plates and the performance bowls. Can you share what that looks like?
Okay, got it. Yes. So basically these plates are going to basically, I think of like a toddler plate, the sectioned plates that little kids have. It's the same concept as to how you might build your plate depending on your training load. Honestly, most of my marathon training athletes, endurance athletes, are living between their moderate and hard day plate, which is a moderate day plate. Split that plate into thirds: a third protein, a third carb, a third color being fruit and veggie, or one or the other. Hard day plate, half of that plate is carbs, quarter protein, quarter color. Quick and dirty. A lot of people like to try and micromanage this, and I say, okay, let's take a step back. If you have a hard day plate and you're still feeling hungry and you need a little bit more, maybe let's have a little bit more protein to feel a little bit more satiated. Or we zoom out and say, oh, after a run this morning, you waited 2 hours to have breakfast. So I'm not super surprised that you're more hungry at lunch and feel like you need a little bit more. So it's a tool that we can use to kind of make adjustments, kind of adapt, because life isn't perfect. Sometimes breakfast might be delayed for 2 hours. And what I hope to teach athletes is that, okay, we're not going to stress too much about this, but we realize like, oh, maybe I went too long without eating. How can I make my adjustment right now in this moment to make sure I'm not getting too deep into what we call within day energy deficits? This is a hard no for me all the time. I like to
Yeah.
keep an open mind, but there are certain things that are non-negotiable, and fasted training is one of them. Um,
Hmm.
Especially, thinking about endurance, marathoners, etc. Um, it does more harm than good, as the research has shown. There's a number of things. One of it may impair recovery, and most people who are showing up training a lot day in, day out, we're going to see a delay in recovery from
Hmm.
fasted training. This also applies to not fueling your workouts, right? I always like to encourage people fueling before and during your workouts, during when it's appropriate, helps muscle recovery because your body isn't going to dip into those glycogen stores for energy. Glycogen is a stored form of carbohydrate. We'll store some in our muscles and our liver. So if you're constantly dipping into that, that means your body needs more and needs to work harder to recover after your workouts. So it's kind of like people constantly run that tank dry. To me,
Mm.
fueling before our training is low hanging fruit to add one of the layers to keeping those glycogen stores solid. We don't need them topped off like we want before race day all the time in training. Like that's just not realistic, right? When we're thinking more in the context of the carb load, that's to really top off those glycogen stores. You don't need to be carb loading all the time, but we do need to be eating enough carbohydrate. And again, low hanging fruit, fuel before all of your workouts. Can be super simple, doesn't have to be a meal, doesn't need to be complicated, because then I hear, oh, well, I get up at 4 a.m. to do my workouts and I'm not hungry at 4 a.m. Well, first, we can't trust hunger cues as athletes for a number of reasons, but also you still need to eat. You got to pay to play is kind of how I say it. And we have
Mm.
lots of options now that can be great, easy to digest fuel sources. Whether it's an applesauce pouch, a banana,
Hmm.
Nature's Bakery fig bars are like my go-to. I have hordes of them in my house all the time because they're really easy to digest. But even like for the super early morning people, a bottle of sports drink,
Yeah.
liquid nutrition, liquid carbs. Also, you're rehydrating after you're fasting overnight, right? Because, yes, there can be benefits to fasting, but as athletes, we should be getting 7 to 9 hours of sleep, which we shouldn't be waking up and eating. So, that's like a great time for our body to fast. Um, so, one is the delayed um, muscle recovery. It's going to impair your recovery. People will say that fasted training promotes fat loss, and that's not really what's happening. Research is showing that it doesn't lead to more fat loss than non-fasted cardio. Uh, if anything, we see more effects where it may increase cortisol levels if we are training fasted. I'm always hesitant kind of to cortisol is having a moment right now, so we could dive into a whole tangent about that. But in particular, we see female athletes more sensitive to this potential negative impacts of cortisol from fasted training. Um, Hormonally, we're going to just be a
Mm.
little bit more sensitive in that realm. And I do like to say, just in my little preface with cortisol, is that it's cortisol is not inherently bad. We need cortisol for certain functions in our body. It's just we want to make sure that our cortisol response is functioning like it should. So it can and potentially will negatively impact the cortisol response. Segueing into female athletes, women's bodies, especially when we're thinking about the premenopausal athlete, are very, very sensitive to inadequate energy, not having enough calories on board. Again, starting your day fasted and working out, that's just kind of building that deficit. And we see with fasted running or fasted exercise, it may also manifest as a decline in some of those female sex hormones, estrogen and progesterone, and kind of adds into the potential for low energy availability and relative energy deficiency in sport. It also may reduce testosterone levels, which both men and women have those, and we both sexes need those for energy levels, muscle mass, recovery, etc. So we can see a lot of hormonal disruptions, especially if it's
Mm.
happening all the time. I get it, life happens sometimes. It just, that's how the cookie crumbles, and maybe you miss that snack like once every blue moon. Not going to be the end of the world, but I would not make this a habit.
Yeah, and that's like something that you can add as like a process goal if it's something that you really struggle with, and create the habit. And it could be something small like taking that applesauce packet or that banana before training runs and workouts. Like, yes, if you're getting up at 4 a.m., you're probably getting up at 4 a.m. most days to get your training run in,
Mm-hmm.
and creating that system and that habit. And over time, I think it'll get easier to just have it be more natural and your go to. And
Yep.
I know I'm in that space right now of like, I have my routine of what I eat before it, a training run, a recovery run, a workout. It's all a little bit different because of the intensity and how long I'm out there for. But I think it's really important to start now, whether you're training for a fall race or you're getting into running and creating those healthy habits. I want to touch on hunger cues though, before we shift to the next myth, because it's summertime. Hunger cues, I think, are suppressed even more in the summer. Can you talk about that a little bit more in detail, and like what we can do to kind of flow through hunger cues if we don't have them, and what we do to like fuel our body?
Yeah. So just in general, again, like I said, we really can't trust them. I mean, if you're hungry, like when
Yeah.
you were saying like, oh, I was hungry all the time and I woke up hungry. Okay, we can trust those. Absolutely.
Squirrel.
But I see a lot of people be like, oh, well, I'm just like not hungry, so I'm not going to eat. And I was like, well, you just ran 13 miles, so I don't think that's the choice. But the
Yeah.
aerobic endurance exercise will suppress hunger cues. So that's why I tell people we cannot trust to only rely on hunger. Another kind of layer of this is that under eating and under fueling in the athlete or non-athlete alike will alter hunger and fullness. It will quiet those hormones and quiet those responses. Because I always ask
Mm.
my one-on-one clients, do you feel hungry? Like, are we feeling hunger? Because those will be altered in underfueling and under eating as well. So a lot of some of the work I do with those athletes and those individuals is like, we are tracking hunger cues. Are we having them at all? Are we having them in the morning? Are you starving? Okay, that's a sign we need to eat more. Or is it like 4 out of 10, like on a scale of 1 to 10? Oh, that's a good normal
Yeah.
hunger cue. So this alteration, most people make the connection when they hit their rest days, because they're like, oh, I'm really, really hungry. It's a rest day. I'm afraid to eat. And
Yeah.
people will often feel that hunger more on those rest days because they aren't engaging in their training. And that's 100% normal. And
Absolutely.
then we add in the summer aspect, and the heat, and exercising in the heat will suppress our appetite. That's just like another layer to all of this as well.
So what do you say to the athlete? Because I've fallen in this category of like, you're fueling what you would consider well, you're running a long run, it's in the summer, but you're still feeling like that stomach rumble with like 2 miles to go. Is that like a really big red flag of like, whoa, you haven't fueled the way that you thought you did?
With this, I would look at like what you're doing before.
Yeah.
Do we need to increase a little bit more? Do we need to adjust the timing so we get a little bit of more protein or even a slight amount of fat or more
Hmm.
fat in that breakfast for more staying power? I'd also be curious as to what happened the day before. Do like before that long run, I don't know, I'm a big pizza Friday girl, especially like when I was Ironman training, like whole pizza all mine on a Friday night, like nobody touched this. And like, do we
Okay.
need to do like, so when I have clients practice their carb load, we at least do a few of their peak weeks of practicing their carb load before their
Yeah.
long run or their big training weekend. So they can find out what works for them in their carb load, but also then they tend to show up for those big peak week long runs at a better space, more fueled, more glycogen on board. So I would look at what you're doing before, and maybe you just need to kind of increase it or adjust the composition so you have a little bit of staying power. For doing a little bit more protein or fat, I usually, of course, like to push the meal, make sure we have enough time from the meal to the start of the run for digestion to occur there.
Absolutely. And that's a great reminder too, that it's not necessarily maybe that moment, but it could be coming from like the day before and not fueling your best, or a few days before, kind of given that. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's like kind of one of my beefs. I don't believe in macro counting. I don't think a lot of sports dietitians do, but it doesn't take into account those ebbs and flows in training, right? And that what we
Yeah.
do on Wednesday is going to show up on Thursday and Friday and Saturday, and it all kind of will add up over time, especially if you have a bigger training load or a more training intensity that we want to make sure we're kind of checking the boxes for the fueling, recovery, that day, but also zoom out and be like, oh, like I have a pretty big effort this weekend. Maybe I'm going to add a bowl of cereal as a bedtime snack. Cereal was also one of the things that like helps me survive
I
Ironman
love
training as
cereal.
well.
Yeah, I like recently like rediscovered cereal, and I say recently, like over the last year. It is a game changer. Game changer.
Yeah.
Like carbo loading, awesome for after a run, especially in the summer. It's been something that I've really leaned into with like I'll usually use like Core Power protein as like the milk source or the liquid source, and it tastes delicious after a summer run.
I'm a Lucky Charms girl, and I'm located in sunny Buffalo, New York. And one of the things that people don't realize is that we have a General Mills factory here. So some of
Oh,
my
cool.
runs, I'll be out there and I'm like, oh, they're making Cheerios today, and you can smell it in the air.
That's so great. And that's my cereal of choice right now, multigrain Cheerios. Super great for the gluten-free athlete. and
Right.
um and it just hits the spot for sure. All right, well, I want to get into our second question, which is I need to avoid carbs. And I'm going to put this in parentheses because I'm trying to lose weight, in parentheses.
You
Absolutely. I think that's so smart and so powerful. And it kind of, I mean, gosh, everyone is so busy. And I feel like with training itself, it creates a lot of, it's just a lot of time that you're running, you're training, maybe you're doing mobility, strength training. And even with like the nutrition side of things, if you can think about your meals as performance plates and performance bowls, how easy that is now to shift into that versus like some nights even though I'm a big believer in performance plates and bowls, there's still nights where I look at my refrigerator, it's like the end of the night and I'm busy, not the end of the night, but like dinner time. And I'm like, what am I going to eat? Like, what am I going to have? What am I going to eat to support my training tonight? And that can be a really stressful place to be. But if you can just like take it down a few notches,
Mhm.
let's put together a performance plate, a performance bowl, put something yummy together and kind of, check in with yourself. What's working, what's not working,
Yep.
and move forward in that way. I love that.
Yeah, feeding yourself can be very stressful. It's a lot of work. So I get it. And that's, coming up with really simple, and it's going to look different for everybody. Like one of my always on hand, I like to call it an oh shit meal. Like, oh shit, I'm out of food, out of like meal prep food, but like I also have to feed myself. I always have chickpea pasta. I always have like frozen steamed broccoli. Maybe it's
Great.
pesto I mix in it, or it's like olive oil and salt. But like chickpea pasta, carb. This has a good amount of protein, fiber,
Yeah.
a little broccoli for a little color, a little fat with the pesto or the olive oil, and like bada bing, bada boom, right? It gets the job done.
Yeah, like we don't have to overthink it. And I think a lot of times that happens. And it can be really easy to overthink it. But yeah, you're right. Those are all things that we could have in our pantry, in our freezer, ready to go for those oh crap moments, those oh crap nights, which I have, I feel like very frequently at this stage in the game. with my training and just running a business and coaching, it's like,
Mhm.
I mean, Stevie, you know, it's like so difficult. Or maybe you have a family, like whatever your situation is, it's like it might be the last thing on your mind, but it gets to also be very important. And it's something that you can like normalize in an easy fashion
Mhm.
to get all the goodness that you need to show up getting, feeling ready to train for the next day, which is always the goal.
Yeah.
So, what do you say to an athlete that says, okay, so I am going to focus on carbs? Okay. But do I really need to carbo load for my race? Because that seems excessive.
Oh yeah, we need a carb load. There's
We
more
need to
than
carb
enough
load.
research about how effective carb loading is to performance. So yes, we still need to carb load. Carb loading is going to look different for everybody. I kind of briefly mentioned this earlier.
Hmm.
Like when we practice our carb load, my carb load probably doesn't look like your carb load because I tell people it sounds glamorous, but like it should really feel like a chore. Uh, it's not easy. It feels uncomfortable, but this is also why we practice it because two, we can. I think about like the glycogen storage as like pockets. Like we can deepen the pockets
Ooh.
when we practice it. Our body is going to get more efficient at storing that glycogen when we practice it. Um,
Hmm.
so yes, so it's not comfortable. And if you finish your race and you're like, wow, I would really love a vegetable, that's how I tell people that you know you did it right. Like, I am over this. Um, so
Yes.
yes, we do know that carb loading is going to help performance for sure on race day. It's also going to help that recovery after your
Mhm.
race too. Not that we should be recovering and like trying to turn into another marathon 2 weeks later, but we do, again, it's
Right.
about supporting our body for the long haul and making sure it's not taking weeks and weeks to fully recover from this race as well. So we're team carb load.
We are team carb load for sure. I went into my sixth marathon last winter for CIM or last December for CIM. And it was by far the best carb load that I've done over the course of 3 days. That General Mills multigrain Cheerio came in a clutch for this carbo load. And I felt the best ever. And I think it's really important to know that it does take time. And like
Yeah.
Stevie has mentioned, you can practice it in training before your long runs. And the more races you do, half marathons included, because you can carbo load before a half marathon. Half marathon, it's typically a day to a day and a half. Marathon, we suggest about 3 days.
Mhm.
And you can dial it in. It's something that you can get better and better at. And I laughed like quite excessively to your comment about the vegetable because after CIM, there was a girl that also ran it. And I think I saw this on social media. Literally, it was a picture of her finishing CIM. The next picture was a plate of vegetables with hummus. And she's like, this is what I'm craving. And I'm like, girl, you did the carbo load right.
Yep.
Good job.
That's how you know. That's how you know. A couple of summers ago, I actually did on Saturday, I did a 10-kilometer swim, open water, not wet
Whoa.
swim, and then drove 3 hours. And the next day, won an 18-mile race, running race. My carb load
Amazing.
for that was pretty epic because it was like gas station carb. I was getting like the Rice Krispie treats that were like the size of my forearm and like all of the orange juice and Gatorade.
Okay, so I love that so much, and we were talking about this before we jumped on the recording. Can you share some ideas that runners can implement when they are on the go, or maybe they're like, I drive from Boulder to Denver, vice versa, like for long runs. So there's about an hour difference between the drives. Like if someone is traveling a lot, or maybe they're concerned about like what they should eat. What are some great things, let's say at a gas station, that runners can buy and consume and feel good about?
Okay, so are we talking in the context like before a workout, in a carb load, or just like in general?
All of the above, wherever you want to go with it.
Okay, because I'm like, these are kind of different. Like with a carb load, I'm like, find your Rice Krispie treats, find your juices, right?
Yeah.
Find all those really easy to digest carb. Sour Patch uh, Kid watermelon ones,
Yeah.
great carb load food, right? Um, but like if we're also thinking in the context of like, oh, I just did a long run and I'm out on the fly. I love chocolate milk. Chocolate milk is, you know, for those of us who can tolerate dairy, is a great tool. Like chocolate milk and a banana, it's going to give you a nice mix of protein and carb for a post workout recovery. If we're thinking about just like snacks, like you travel for work and maybe it's not around a workout, this is where I love to go back kind of to the performance plate concept. Okay, it's not a full meal, so we're not thinking about the plate, but how can I pair protein, color, carb? How is this going to look? Do we have like yogurt cups in the little freezer? Do we have like some pretzels that we might want? Is there fruit? Just looking at what those options, some of that's going to depend on like what you prefer to eat and what you don't. Maybe it's like a Cliff Builder's bar and a piece of fruit. So are we getting color, carb, protein and mixing it together as to like what might be available to know, okay, I want this snack to satiate me until I can get to my next meal and like kind of get to where I need to go.
I love that so much. I think that's very, very helpful. It's like let's bring it back to the performance plate. Like
Always.
there we go. Always, always cannot forget it. Okay, so this myth is one that I fell into for quite a while. I think a lot of first time endurance athletes, or as your training increases, maybe increased mileage, this is something that comes up. I'm tired all the time from training. That's normal, right?
No, it's not. And
No,
I
it's
feel like
not.
it's so glorified too. Because everybody's like, look, I'm doing the most. I'm so tired and I'm doing the most. And I'm like, oh, I need to have this coffee. I'm like dying without this coffee. You should not be tired all the time. You should not need to nap most days of the week. You should not need to nap after your long runs. It's not it. Of course, there's going to be nuance and outliers. Like
Yes.
maybe you had a really bad night of sleep and like you need a nap after one long run, but like this should not be a consistent thing. There's lots of things that could be causing this fatigue, but you know, everybody wants to be like, oh, I'm iron deficient, or oh, I have B12 deficiency. And I'm like, okay, but did we try eating more? Right? Like
Low hanging fruit, low
low
hanging
hanging
fruit.
fruit. Sometimes even I'm sitting at my desk and I'm like, oh, I'm kind of tired. I'm like, I'm gonna go have a snack. And I was like, oh, I feel better.
Same. Same. Absolutely. I think it's really important to check in with yourself as an athlete every day. Like, how did training go? How is my fueling? How is my mobility, my sleeping? Like, all these things.
Mhm.
I think it's so powerful and so impactful because you grow and learn as an athlete, and like low hanging fruit. If you are feeling tired after that training run, even if it's like an easy effort, recovery effort, a workout, a long run, really look to that nutrition first. Yesterday, I had a pretty big workout, and I also had a very busy day,
Mhm.
and it was all back to back to back to back. And I thought, I don't even know how I'm going to eat because I'm talking all day long, like, and go to the bathroom, but like eating. How am I going to do this? So after my workout, I went to my favorite place in Boulder and got like a breakfast sandwich and a pastry, like a gluten-free scone, inhaled it,
Mhm.
drank like chocolate milk, and just took in as much as I could right after that workout.
Mhm.
And Stevie, I literally was sharing this with an athlete that I was talking to at like 4 o'clock on Wednesday. And now I start my Wednesdays at like, I get up at like 5 a.m.
Mhm.
And at this point, it's just been like nonstop. And I'm like, I feel great. I'm like ready to go. I have so much energy. And it's like when you experience that and you kind of play around, you experiment with it,
Mhm.
you can really see and hopefully see and feel the benefits. And now it's something that I'm going to do every week. It's going to be great.
Right? And it's
Why
like,
not?
you know, sometimes it is more complex than just like needing a snack, but like that's why
Yes.
people start. Like you food is many things. It's joy, it's connection, it's taste, but it's also energy, and sometimes your body just needs a little bit more energy. And I always have with my one-on-one clients, like I try to have them get honest with their relationship with caffeine, because I see this kind of go hand in hand, where it's like, I am not anti-caffeine. I have coffee every day, but I make sure, like, I don't need it when I wake up every day. Like, I'm not like, oh, I can't do anything without my coffee. That's like a red flag for me as a dietitian. Is like, oh, okay, this is how we are. We need caffeine to actually get things moving. That's a big red flag.
Well, that's so interesting. I mean, I love coffee.
Oh, I love coffee.
I
And
love
like
it. I love
occasionally it happens, right? Like, but I'm here to call the kettle black. I always will. Like when I was Ironman training, there was a point where I was like, I got to get on my bike with a cup of coffee and like eat too.
Yeah.
But I like couldn't like get into my training without that cup of coffee like on the trainer with me. And that's a red flag, kind of like in the cortisol response that we see, like there's some sort of dysfunction here, and we got to figure this out.
Okay. Yeah. So if you are someone who's every morning finding that you need to have that ASAP as soon as you wake up, that could be a yellow, orange, maybe red, pink flag to talk to Stevie.
Yes. Usually there's things that we need to adjust on the nutrition and even lifestyle side of things, to kind of help. So you actually, like, you're not dragging yourself out of bed every morning. That's not how it should be. So that is a flag of not the green variety.
Yeah. All right. So the next question is, I should consume less food on my recovery and rest days because I'm doing less.
Do you know that game Smash or Pass? Pass. No, you should not. No. This is where we kind of take that transactional relationship away from food and exercise. And, as I mentioned earlier, we often feel hungrier on those rest days. Some of that is that we're not having that suppression of our hunger hormone. But also, the goal of the rest day is to repair and recover from all of the work that we did that past week. Mm-hmm. And that is a very energy demanding process. So I know it's very uncomfortable to sit with that, like, oh my God, I'm constantly hungry on my rest days. But this is where we just kind of work through those thoughts and thinking about, like, okay, this is going to help me give my body what it needs to get stronger so I can show up in my next week of training and like really set my body up for success. And then, so there is some of like the technical stuff of like, okay, how can we make your meals more satiating? Can we add a little bit more of X, Y, or Z to make your snacks more filling? Because I see a lot of people try to make their snacks as small as possible. And I'm like, not really the goal of the snack. The goal of the snack
yeah,
is to make you like not hungry and like give your body energy and nutrients. I think about the 100-calorie packs like of the 2000s, and I was like, we got to get away from this mentality.
Definitely. And that's also true for the taper, right? Like you can show up to taper, and as your body's repairing itself and working really, really hard to create this like beast mode runner on race day, you could enter taper and be in taper feeling hunger cues and feeling hungry most days, and you might need to take in more. And this is before the carbo load begins.
Yes.
Yeah.
100%. Totally normal. That taper week, especially if you're training like high volume, can be, as I like to say, just weird. It's a weird week. And it's one of the things, like with your coach, if you work with a dietitian, like you got to like lean in and kind of trust the guidance that you're getting. I mean, when I trained for Ironman, my peak weeks were 20 to 23 hours of training. And it was just like, when you come down from that, it's a lot for your body to go through. Like when we're sleep wise, nutrition wise, hydration wise, and then you're getting ready for this, at least for Ironman, it was 11, 12-hour event. It's like, it's kind of just being able to zoom out, or like marathoners, like, yeah, you've been training a lot for the last few months, and then like your base building months too. And now you're really getting ready to do this really awesome thing. So like, let's use your team and support your body as much as possible.
Yeah, I absolutely love that so much. Okay, next myth debunked is I want to avoid sugar to feel my best.
I have so many feelings about this. And I do always, I like to preface this that each of us is going to respond a little bit differently to certain foods, right? Like I get this a lot in the context of carb loads, where people feel like, okay, well, when I eat a big bowl of pasta, I just crash, right? And that could just be how your body is handling that big bowl of pasta. Maybe pasta isn't the right choice for you. Maybe you need a little bit of protein in it. Or maybe we're going to look at potatoes or rice or something, a different, easy to digest carbohydrate that might just work a little bit better for you. And this goes back to, this is why we practice our carb load, to see what foods are going to work best. But I am team not avoiding sugar. Glucose is a preferred fuel source, especially when we're thinking about like exercise. Also for our brain too, which is why one of those sneaky signs of underfueling might be like brain fog, mood changes as well. Like if you're really irritable, a lot of anxiety, some of that can be related to not having enough carbohydrate on board. But sugar is not inherently bad. It's a great tool as an athlete, and it goes back to like, we just need more than the average person. And when we get down to it, like our carbohydrates are all broken down to sugar in our body, right? It's just kind of, how are they getting broken down? How quickly are they getting broken down? So it's not something that we need to be afraid of. It is a tool to help us elevate our performance and our recovery as athletes. And it's just about kind of finding for you that happy medium in between, right? Like, yes, we want nutrient dense carbohydrates. We want complex carbohydrates and those fiber rich starchy carbs to be a part of our diet because they provide us lots of other micronutrients. But also, like, I don't know, my tummy is so delicate. Like, I don't need to be eating those things like in the middle of the day. Like, I don't need to have quinoa at lunch, quinoa and beans at lunch, and then go try to run in the afternoon or swim in the afternoon, because that's not going to work out well for me.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like knowing yourself, knowing your body, knowing what's working for you, and not, not just being all in and not being too avoidant of what's going in your body, but also knowing what works for you and what's going to help you feel successful in training. And if you don't know what that is, I mean, Stevie's a great resource.
Hello. Yeah, and everybody is different, right? Like, but when we kind of putting those food rules in place can be a huge limiter to you as an athlete. And a lot of people don't realize it, is they feel like, oh, to be the best, to perform the best, I need to really like limit or avoid this, or make sure I'm only having like whole grains, and I would never have X, Y, or Z. And it's really just you standing in your own way.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great way to phrase it, for sure. Okay. So the last myth is I don't need to bring fuel gels or water on my training runs.
There, the internet, there's a lot going on the internet. I had some men really say some awful things to me on threads about this yesterday. Oh, it was so bad.
On threads?
Yes.
I feel like, oh, I'm so sorry.
They called me a glorified chef.
Oh.
I was like, okay,
Ew.
block. Anyways, yeah, we like to fuel our runs. There's guidelines as to when you should fuel your runs. Like, we have like runs over 60 minutes. You're going to benefit from carbohydrate intake. I am probably a little bit more on the generous side of fueling our runs. Because again, our athletes show up and train day in and day out. They also have a lot of other life responsibilities. Like it's always like, okay, but this run, this morning I did a 5-mile run, right? It's hot and humid here on the East Coast. Like it was 45-minute run. Did I technically need to fuel it? Like during it? No. But did I bring 2 scoops of Tailwind in a bottle? Yes, I did, because I know this is going to make me feel better during the run. I'm going to recover better. I'm going to be hydrated. There's only things to be gained from it versus like, is this another potential space where I could put myself in an energy deficit because tomorrow I have like a big lift, like a rep max deadlift lift and a swim. So like it's sometimes a little bit more nuanced. And I find a lot of runners like to get away with like, oh, but it's only an 80-minute easy run. And I'm like, okay, but like even if you just bring like 30 or 40 grams of carb with you, you're still going to benefit from that. Like there's nothing to be lost on something on that end.
Yeah.
So like I said, I'm more generous than other sports dietitians with this because I know most people are like flying pretty close to the sun with their energy levels and their training, that I'm like, okay, if we're really splitting hairs over like a scoop of scratch,
Right.
you know.
Right. Right. Yeah, and I think it's like it's good practice to train your stomach, to have those gels. Like I always have an emergency gel with me at this point in training. It's like there's a gel in my handheld, and there's scratch in my handheld, and that handheld comes with me on every single run. And it's also great practice because it's also the handheld that I'm using in my race. So I'm getting great practice on holding it and getting stronger with that and just kind of ignoring it really. And it's there. And I think it's really important. I like the way that you said that and framed it, Stevie, of like, there's nothing to lose by doing this, and there's everything to gain. And if we're already putting a lot of time and energy and financial investment into training and running, why wouldn't we want to also do this?
Yeah, absolutely. It's just like, to me, it's like a no-brainer. And like, we know how important carbohydrate intake is in thyroid function, right? Which the thyroid is so important in energy metabolism and how we feel and like bone health and bone formation and resorption. And, you know, even like when we think about like iron status, which a lot of people who run high volume really struggle with their ferritin. And is it like, is the supplement the answer? It can be a tool, but like, are we getting enough
Yeah.
carbohydrates? Are we getting enough energy? Are we balancing our nutrition with our training load? Where it's just like this, you know, again, one gel isn't going to make or break your ferritin, but like, it's about, like you said, those habits consistently done over time. Okay, we're
Yeah.
consistently always doing this, the training the gut piece, right? It's like, okay,
Yeah.
maybe you know, it's a 45-minute run, and for me, my sweet spot is usually like 76 to 80 grams of carb per hour, which I've worked very hard to be able to tolerate that much with my training. So like
Yeah.
in an hour run, you know, maybe I'm not hitting that 76 grams, but I'm still taking in tailwind or scratch plus a gel in that hour run, because it's just going to keep that gut at its happy functioning.
Yeah, and that's like ultimately what we want. We want to be a happy, strong runner, and that's what this all comes down to.
Absolutely.
And I think that's so cool. I was thinking about it as you were talking about like the one gel one day isn't going to make a difference. But if you are doing it every day, it is going to make a difference. And when you think about your training cycles, we talk about stacking those bricks and stacking the workouts, stacking the long runs, stacking the cycles itself. And what a strong runner comes from out of that, right? Like once you, if you're doing that for years and years and years, and I kind of think of the same thing as like a gel. Like if you're really practicing that on every single run or most runs, you are going to get to a place of just feeling like your ultimate best. And that's, I think, what we're all striving for, is like to feel good, to feel confident, to be happy. And fuel is one of those pieces in our training that can give us that pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
100%.
This was so much fun to chat with you today. We might need to do a series, like a Stevie Lynn series.
I'm here for it. I love it.
No, you have a group coaching program starting in a few weeks. I'd love to hear more about it and when it starts, what's involved in the group coaching, all the things.
Yeah, so I'm super excited. This is something new I'm offering in my business to, it's definitely for the athlete who's like, I want to go all in on my nutrition. Like, I hear you. Like, I got changes I need to make. You want to know what to eat, how much, how to support your training goals and your health, work on the mindset, work on those energy levels if you're a person who's winding up on the couch after every long run. It's going to be all encompassing from in season to off season, like how nutrition is going to change as our training changes. We'll talk about race week. We'll do carb loads. We're going to do race fueling. We're going to work on meal planning and preps and snacks. So basically, like, it is all in.
That is so cool.
Yeah, I wanted to cover kind of like all the foundations of sports nutrition throughout like an athlete's, like we think about the year in a cycle, to start gaining those skills. It's 8 weeks long. So it's going to be a mix of pre-recorded modules where I'll be teaching on the topics. I try to keep those modules like 10 to 20 minutes because we're all very busy. And then each week we'll also meet with a live coaching call where we'll talk more about that week's topic. You can bring your questions, basically get the coaching aspect from me on that live call. We'll also have a Slack channel where you can ask questions like in the week, between our call and some of those modules, plus lots of other, like bonus recipe book and carb loading guide and all of the things. So this is going to start August 26th. And like I said, going to run 8 weeks. You'll have access to all the material forever. Like lifetime access is very important because it's a lot to learn in 8 weeks, right?
Yeah.
So you can always refer back. Like if you're like, oh, I'm only doing half marathons now. And like maybe 2 years you're doing a marathon, right? So you have that information forever. You can even get like one-on-one sessions with me, VIP one-on-one sessions. We'll talk about blood work, supplementation, all of that as well. So that's called Real Fuel Group Coaching. And we go live on the 26th and I'm so excited.
That's so exciting. And as someone who has worked with a sports dietitian and as a coach, like I feel like that is the piece that's probably missing from most athletes, like team structure, right? So they might be training with a team, they might have a coach, they might have a mental strength coach, and they might be missing that sports dietitian piece to make a more cohesive team. Mm-hmm. So if anyone is thinking like, oh, I resonate with some of these myths, or yeah, I am showing up this way, or I'm unsure of what to do, I think this is a great opportunity to lean in, learn as much as you can, and just think about like all the gains you can make from just changing what we call the low-hanging fruit, right? And fueling more and fueling for success and fueling for performance, which is really exciting. Stevie, where can they find more information on the group coaching, and where can they find you on online?
Yeah, so you can find me on my corner of the internet. My Instagram handle is @StevieLinLin with one N. And on my Instagram page, you can find more about group coaching in my bio. You can go to my website, stevielinrd.com. I also have my own podcast that you will have to come on. It's called Real Fuel with SLS, which is kind of where I got the group coaching name on. We like to keep it real, if you have not noticed.
Good branding too.
Right? I was like, oh, we're gonna keep this on brand. So feel free to follow. My website has a lot of like articles, free resources available for you guys too. But if you do have any questions about group coaching or one-on-one, you can always reach out. I'm happy.
Great. Oh my gosh. I love that so much. Thank you so much for your time today. You've been amazing. And hopefully we have you back on again.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Thanks so much.